Hello, my name is Monica Lourenço, and I'm a researcher at the University of Aveiro in Portugal. I'm also a teacher educator, and I've been involved in the supervision of language teachers and generalist teachers in the early years and in primary education. My research areas are related to plurilingualism, education for diversity, and internationalization of the curriculum. And more recently, I've been focusing my attention on global citizenship, which is a sort of a controversial area that is simultaneously praised but also met with patronizing smiles. Indeed, if some people claim that global citizenship is a stepping stone for a more sustainable world, there are others that regard it as purely utopian. So my goal in this keynote talk is to share with you my experience, in particular, how I've been trying to move global citizenship in teacher education from rhetoric to reality. I've organized this talk in three key moments. Firstly, I will address the discourse on global citizenship education, GCE, the meaning and relevance of this concept and its place in the curriculum. Then I'll present the results of two case studies that I've conducted with teacher educators and pre-service teachers at the University of Aveiro who have been integrating GCE in their teaching practice and in their identity. Finally, I will share my vision of what teacher education for global citizenship can be. So, starting with the rhetoric, we can really see that over the past decades, GCE has gained prominence in international discourse. The United Nations Global Education First initiative, promoted by the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, is just one example. Among the three pillars that are outlined in this global initiative, the third aims to foster global citizenship, sustaining that education must be transformative and fully assume its central role in helping people to forge more just, peaceful, tolerant, and inclusive societies. The United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development has also elevated GCE to other key policy agendas, access to education and quality education. In Target 4.7 within SDG 4, quality education, we can see that a fundamental goal is to ensure that all learners acquire knowledge and skills that are needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through global citizenship and appreciation of cultural diversity. In Europe, worth highlighting is really the Maastricht Global Education Declaration. This document, which was created in 2002, considers global education as essential, as all citizens need knowledge and skills to understand, participate in, and interact critically with our global society. So global citizenship education policy across Europe has really become increasingly popular, framed by the growing displacement of people fleeing violence and environmental disaster across European borders, the rise in right-wing populism across the continent, and the threat of terror and radicalization. GCE has also gained increased attention from research. According to the most recent edition of the Global Education Digest, released very recently, which provides a recent bibliography of academic and research materials that are relevant to the field of GCE. The number of publications on the theme has really increased dramatically. Similar results are given when you make a search on Scopus, the largest article database worldwide. We can identify nearly 1,000 journal articles written about this topic in the past 10 years, revealing a significant growing trajectory since 2009. So in a nutshell, we can say that GCE has become one of the educational priorities of the 21st century. But what exactly is GCE and why has it become so relevant nowadays? Perhaps you've seen this cartoon elsewhere. We have four people that are standing on a sinking boat. Two of them are trying desperately to remove water from the boat with a bucket, while the other two stand peacefully in the upper corner of the boat. They are glad that the hole isn't at their end. The cartoon is not only a metaphor of the dichotomy between the North and the South, but also of the interconnected and interdependent nature of our world. Indeed, what happens in a remote place, whether it's a natural disaster, a conflict, or a virus, affects us on a local level and vice versa, even if we are sometimes unaware of the real consequences of our individual actions. And to find solutions for such problems that have really crossed the national borders and have become global problems, we need to work together, we need to be creative, we need to communicate respectfully across cultural distance. As the American educator James Banks once said, in this new millennium, we need the knowledge, attitudes, and skills to function in our cultural communities. But we also need to acquire the knowledge and skills required to become effective citizens in the global community. And this brings out the need for clearer and bolder educational goals, as well as more flexible and inclusive forms of education. So education is being asked now to move to a new paradigm where the focus should not be on perpetuating national values, but rather on developing a sense of collective identity that transcends individual cultural, religious, ethnic, or other differences, on educating students to live together instead of reducing education to the preparation of skilled workers, on fostering collaboration, respect, responsible participation, instead of individualism and competitiveness, on educating the heart as well as the mind. And these are features of the new educational paradigm that are at the heart of GCE. It is not easy to present a definition of GCE, considering that this is a complex concept and even regarded by some as an oxymoron. Still, based on research, several international organizations and NGOs, such as the Council of Europe and Oxfam, have attempted to crystallize the meaning of GCE mainly for educational purposes. One of the first definitions of GCE is from the Council of Europe's Global Education Declaration that I've just showed you, that was signed in 2002. So the Council sees global education as education that opens people's eyes and minds to the realities of the world and awakens them to bring about a world of greater justice, equity, and human rights for all. Another useful definition is the one from Oxfam, an international confederation of NGOs that are working to end injustice that cause poverty. So Oxfam understands that learners are entitled to an education that equips them with the knowledge, skills, and values they need to embrace the opportunities and challenges they encounter and to create the kind of world that they want to live in. So they call this education for global citizenship. Oxfam also presents very useful examples of what GCE is and isn't. According to them, GCE is not telling people what to think or do, but rather asking questions and developing their critical thinking. It's not mostly about other places and people, but about exploring local and global connections and our views, values, and assumptions. It's not about raising money for charity, but about working really hard towards social justice. It is also not too difficult for small children, but it's for all age groups. And it's also not an extra subject that you would cram into a crowded curriculum, but for all areas of the curriculum to be worked in a transversal manner and interdisciplinary manner. And it should not be limited to the classroom, but it should extend and involve the whole school environment. So based on these definitions from international and scholarly discourse, I've been refining my own definition of GCE over the years. So I understand that GCE is a critical and transformative educational perspective that allows both teachers and learners to embrace the opportunities and challenges of a globalized, interdependent, and multicultural world, and to assume active roles both locally and globally as proactive contributors to a more inclusive, peaceful, and sustainable world. From my point of view, GCE should help students to build their own understanding of world events, think about their values and what's important to them, develop an argument and to voice their opinions, to challenge ignorance and prejudice, and to get involved in local, national, and global communities, and to see that they really have the power to act and influence the world around them. And it's interesting that, I believe that our role as teachers is really to develop the knowledge, the skills, attitudes, and values that they need, and to provide them with relevant opportunities. And sometimes I use this metaphor, a new set of glasses that allows them to consider both their local and their global responsibilities and to take ownership of their future, shaping their choices and also their decision making. According to UNESCO, this entails the development of 3 core conceptual dimensions, which are based on and include aspects from all other domains of learning, cognitive, social-emotional, and behavioral. So the cognitive dimension, or the HAT, is linked to the development of knowledge, understanding, and critical thinking on global, regional, national, and local issues, and on the interdependence of different countries and populations. The social-emotional dimension is related to that feeling of belonging to a common humanity, sharing values and responsibilities, empathy, solidarity, and respect for differences and diversity. And the behavioral dimension, or the HAND, is associated with the ability to act effectively and responsibly at the local, national, and global level for a more peaceful and a more sustainable world. And Oxfam offers really a similar take on GCE, seeing the global citizen as someone who is aware of the wider world and has a sense of their role as world citizen, that respects and values diversity, that has an understanding of how the world works, someone that is passionately committed to social justice, participates in the community at a diverse range of levels, works with others to make the world a more equitable and sustainable place, and that really takes responsibility for his or her actions. So I sense that it is now time for some practical ideas. So I would like to share with you an interesting book that I think might help young children navigate the complexities of the concept of GCE. So this is a book that is written by Oreo and illustrated by Chris Hill, and it's called What Does It Mean to Be Global? So in the book, the author really sustains that being global is being curious about other parts of the world, is recognizing that your language is just one of thousands spoken on our earth, and it's also about opening your mind to new possibilities such as giving back. So we can see that all 3 dimensions of GCE are present here. So, and the book, it's interesting that the fact that the book is also a version in Spanish and French, so it makes it possible for you to do some activities that involve language diversity by comparing similar parts of the text in different languages. So I've added some links here. I hope that you are able to search them on YouTube. You have a book reading with author Oreo that you can also take a look at. And I've also added some ideas for lesson plans and other resources. You can go to the Globetrotting Kids and you can add you can find some ideas for how to use this book and explore this book and promote GCE competences. But exactly what are GCE competencies? What are the knowledge, attitudes, and skills that students need to develop? Oxfam does something that is very useful. It conceptualizes a tripartite approach to GCE that includes knowledge and understanding, the skills, values, and attitudes that learners need both to participate fully in a globalized society and economy and to secure a more just, inclusive, and sustainable world than the one they have inherited. So this includes, for instance, knowledge and understanding of social justice and equity, skills such as critical thinking, and a respect for for people and for human rights. And Oxfam has also developed the framework for global citizenship, which understands GCE as a lifelong learning path that begins in early childhood and continues throughout all levels of education. And this requires both formal and informal approaches, as well as curricular and extracurricular interventions. And something that the framework also does is to emphasize the need for GCE to be integrated in a systematic and gradual way throughout the curriculum. It does provide a valuable tool for curriculum design. So when you're planning the objectives, your learning goals for ages 3 to 5, you can come here and see, okay, where can I include respect for people and human rights? Am I making this too difficult for children? Well, you can add something like starting to think of others as an important value and attitude to be developed at this age group. So it is really considering all of the above, it is not surprising that in many countries worldwide have started to integrate GCE into their curricula and policy documents, both in response to the needs of a diversified student population that is constituted by global migration flows, and as a means to prepare students to compete in the global labor market. So we have also these two reasons for including GCE in the curriculum. According to recent monitoring reports from the UNESCO and the OECD, countries that are integrating GCE principles do it in various ways. It could be including a cross-curriculum approach, a whole school approach, which is sometimes difficult to conduct, an integrated component within different subjects, and sometimes a separate subject approach. Usual topics are related to human rights, peace and conflict, cultural, gender diversity, and also sustainable development. And the traditional subject areas where GCE is mostly integrated are the social, natural sciences, but also the arts and foreign languages. This is not surprising considering that languages are not mere instruments of communication, but really allow us to learn about ourselves and about others. They provide opportunities for interaction with other civilizations, their cultures and worldviews. They encourage the development of general knowledge about the world and social-cultural knowledge about the societies where the target language is spoken. They foster intercultural dialogue, democratic citizenship, allowing students to interact with others and to develop respect for their values and practices. So we can really find an interesting link between GCE and foreign languages. In a recent chapter that proposes a pedagogical framework for the integration of GCE into the EFL classroom, Ana Raquel Simões and I sustain that the English language classroom is an optimal space for GCE, as it provides learners with opportunities to explore issues of identity and diversity while they are analyzing similarities and differences between people, places, cultures, and other languages through plurilingual approaches, for instance. They are also an opportunity to develop an awareness of global interdependence, of globalization in this world where English and Englishes evolve and influence each other. They also provide an opportunity to explore global issues while developing written communication skills, critical thinking, and empathy. And also, they are an opportunity to appreciate a range of perspectives, exploring how texts from different social, cultural contexts influence values, beliefs, and a sense of identity. Still, despite all of the calls, guides, and goodwill from teachers worldwide, the latest reports on progress towards meeting target 4.7, particularly in what concerns GCE, they have concluded worldwide GCE levels remain low. According to the UNESCO's 2020 Global Education Monitoring Report, only 12% of countries report including GCE principles in national policy documents and curricula. About 8 in 10 countries report revising textbooks, although change is also constrained by the slow process of curricular reform and textbook development. Most striking is the fact that appropriate teacher education measures are still lacking. In many countries, pre-service and in-service teacher programs include limited or no core knowledge in this field. Many programs have begun to meet these demands, but efforts really tend to be fragmented and dependent on individual teacher educators' commitments. So it is really a pity that levels remain so low in terms of GCE. Academic research has been both explaining and adding to these findings. Recent studies confirm that GCE is still not embedded in teachers' practice in a systematic manner, but rather remains a sporadic occurrence and a moral optional choice for willing and able teachers, and I add teacher educators. This is often attributed to the conceptual vagueness of global citizenship. Indeed, Karen Pashby and colleagues have very recently stated that there are multiple ideological constellations overlapping and even contradicting one another within the field of GCE. Starting with Andreotti's soft versus critical dichotomy, GCE has really been pushed and pulled in a continuum, ranging from the neoliberal discourse with privileges market rationality focused on self-investment and enhanced profits, to the more critical democratic discourse highlighting the importance of ethical values, social responsibility, and active citizenship. And apart from the conceptual vagueness of GCE, other barriers to the integration of GCE in the curriculum are teachers' propensity to teach national or regional citizenship, curricular insecurity of GCE, so what to teach, how to address sensitive issues, and lack of administrative or curricular support, so validation from peers and also school leaders. As many teachers and teacher educators are really lacking the confidence, knowledge, and skills that are necessary to teach these topics effectively and to encourage these attributes in their students. So what I've been trying to do in the past 5 years is trying to move GCE from paper to reality by focusing on the key actors of GCE that are teachers, in particular teacher educators and pre-service teachers. But before sharing some of the results of my research, I feel that it is important to explain the context of GCE in Portugal. So in the past 5 years, GCE has really gained momentum, not only as a response to international calls to educate critical and responsible citizens, but also as a result of the favorable climate to integrate citizenship issues in the curriculum. So the first time the expression GCE was used is in a national policy. It was in 2010 within the National Strategy for Development Education, which states as its main goal to promote global citizenship by raising awareness of the Portuguese society to development issues in a context of growing interdependence and acting towards social transformation. In 2017, this is a year that marks a transition point in the integration of citizenship issues in the curriculum. Within the scope of the Project for Autonomy and Curriculum Flexibility in Schools, and in line with the document that is also issued in 2017, which was the students' profile at the end of compulsory schooling, the Portuguese government approved a national strategy for citizenship education, which aims to develop competences for a culture of democracy with an impact on individual civic attitudes, interpersonal interactions, and social and intercultural relationships. This document instituted the curricular component of citizenship and development as a cross-curriculum or standalone subject at all levels and cycles of compulsory education, and it then opened the door for the integration of GCE in the curriculum. The document also stresses the need to invest in pre-service and in-service teacher education, a goal that is also set as goal 1.1 in the National Strategy for Development Education. However, teacher education for global citizenship in Portugal is really dependent on individual teacher educators' commitment. Nonetheless, it is worth highlighting that there is a recent postgraduate course titled Education for Development and Global Citizenship that is offered by the High School of Education of the Polytechnic Institute of Viana do Castelo, but which is not aimed only for teachers, but also for civil society members, for instance. So this is the current picture of GCE in Portugal, and is within this framework that I've been developing my research. So I decided to work firstly with teacher educators, and I was lucky enough to find a group of 7 volunteers who agreed to participate in a professional development program aimed to support them in embedding global citizenship, what I called at the time a global outlook, in their teaching practice. Teachers are mostly from language didactics field, although an invitation was sent to all teachers of the Department of Education and Psychology of the University of Aveiro. The project consisted of 9 two-hour sessions over a period of 16 months. These were structured as participatory action research, whereby teams of teacher educators that were responsible for a course unit designed, developed and assessed GCE projects and reflected upon their own practice. The program was organized according to 4 stages, which roughly correspond to the distinctive phases of action research. So in stage 1, knowing and sharing, 3 discussion sessions took place to share and construct knowledge around the concept of GCE, on discussing the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that globally competent teachers should develop, and on designing internationalized learning outcomes. In the 3rd session within stage 1, attention was drawn to the analysis of case studies describing GCE practices in teacher education courses. Then in stage 2, planning and collaborating, 2 group sessions were conducted to support teacher educators in planning the projects. Stage 3, acting and developing, covered a 6-month period during which the participating teachers staged the projects in their course units. During this period, 1 group session was conducted to take stock of the project, discuss the major constraints encountered by the teachers. Individual meetings with the teachers and the teams were also carried out, where I acted as more of a critical friend, where I provided ideas and resources. Stage 4, evaluating or assessing and reflecting, marked the final stage of the workshop and included a session to present and discuss the results of the GCE projects, a focus group session on the impact of the project on teachers' professional development, and also on discussing the possibilities and constraints of integrating GCE in the curriculum. So results from thematic analysis of teacher educators' reflections and focus groups show that in general, teachers did not find great difficulty in integrating GCE into their course units, as some already had a focus on GCE topics such as plurilingual or intercultural education or education for sustainability. So as a strength, they really understood GCE as a conceptual umbrella that is appropriate to the current area and also in line with the current national education policy documents, such as the student's profile. And also provided, for teachers, it provided a sense of direction and intentionality to what they were already doing. Still, they highlighted some difficulties that are related with the complexity of the concept, considering that they need more support from institutional leaders, peers, and external experts or facilitators, and follow-up to incorporate it into their professional habitus. And then the second case study I'd like to share with you was conducted with a group of pre-service teachers in Portugal who were enrolled in the 3rd and final year of a degree in basic education, which most of the pre-service teachers then go on to do a professional master's that allows them to teach, for instance, in primary schools as generalist teachers. So the study aimed at understanding whether, how, and to what extent pre-service teachers integrate GCE into their professional knowledge and identity while developing a group project in non-formal education settings. The project, which was a central part of pre-service teachers' evaluation in a course that was titled Educational Intervention Projects, resulted in a book with pedagogical proposals on GCE that bridged formal and non-formal education and was developed in a partnership with the education services of the Ilhavo City Council. The book titled From Ilhavo to the World, you can see the cover on the right here, address GC topics such as linguistic and cultural diversity, sustainability and globalization, and interdependence that are in line with the characteristics of Ilhavo, which is a municipality located in central Portugal with a strong fishing tradition. So these proposals were simultaneously designed to fit the characteristics of 8 municipal non-formal education settings: a culture center, a documentation center, an environmental education center, a municipal library, a science center, a road safety school, a maritime museum, and St. Andrew's Ship Museum, as well as the Portuguese curriculum for primary school. So I'd like to show you one example of the book's activities that can be easily adapted to a formal context, namely to the foreign language classroom. So the activity was called "What is Life at Sea Like?" and was created for the St. Andrew's Ship Museum and for 9 to 10-year-old students. The activity addressed the theme of local identity and linguistic and cultural diversity. And students and pupils were really expected to get acquainted with the hardships and joys of life at sea and to develop awareness to linguistic and cultural diversity. Here are some of the activities that were created by the pre-service teachers. So the first one consisted in listening to a poem that was written and read by a former fisherman, Master Alcino. And the poem was titled Love and Hate, and it describes this fisherman's feelings towards life at sea, so the joys of brotherhood and companionship, and the hardships of longing and loss. After listening to the poem, pupils are invited to write an acrostic with words related to life at sea and to the emotions that they felt while listening to the poem. So here on the upper corner of the PowerPoint, you can see an example for the word fishing, pesca in Portuguese, and emotions that students included there are sharing, hope, longing, and companionship and love. So the third activity involved discovering Norway, which is a popular destination for Portuguese catfish campaigns. Pupils would make a virtual visit to the country by exploring images and objects related to this country. Students could also research themselves and present the results related to their search on the web on languages spoken, important people, or important places prior to visiting the ship. The next step would be to explore Norwegian in a matching exercise. So pupils were given cards with words related to the sea, such as fish boat or sardines. They're written in Norwegian, English, and Portuguese. So they would have to find their match and the correct translation for each. Then a comparison exercise would follow where pupils would identify similarities and differences between languages, discovering that English and Norwegian are more alike than Portuguese, given that they are Germanic languages and Portuguese is a Romance language. The next task would be to read and analyze a letter written in Norwegian from a Norwegian girl describing her daily routine. So pupils will be divided into small groups and given the letter. So they will first be puzzled by the words, but then they will be encouraged to discover words that they could identify, such as routine or familien, and even expressions. So at the beginning, maybe the girl says, "Jeg ulta, jeg ten I don't know how to read it. Sorry, I'm not an expert in Norwegian. So, but they will probably understand that perhaps the girl is presenting herself, saying her name, and also that she's 10 years old, and perhaps saying that Somaroy is probably the place where she lives. So the students will formulate this hypothesis, and then they will prove the hypothesis right or wrong by comparing with the Portuguese version of the letter. And then the final exercise would be to write a reply letter to the girl. I don't know if you can see it because my face is standing in front of the slides. So they would have to write the reply to this letter, they could do this in Portuguese. And also, if you're doing this in the English classroom, they could do this in English, and they could describe their daily routine and also their family members or their houses. So it would be an interesting exercise to explore this concept. So after preparing their pedagogical book or their set of proposals, pre-service teachers wrote their final reflections, and they really expressed how they related to the concept of GCE. And they highlighted difficulties related to the complexity of the concept, which really propelled them to enter a continuous learning process. For instance, we have here Irina that says, I found it difficult to define and understand the concept of GCE with its various assumptions and sub-themes. Despite this, they were able to integrate GCE into their becoming teacher identities, considering that they need to put into practice what they have learned both in the classroom and in their daily lives. We have this interesting example from Laura. I feel that it is my duty as a future teacher to put into practice what I have learned so far in the making of this book, and to commit myself to address GCE in the classroom, encourage other teachers to do so, and contribute to the education of global citizens. But it's also my duty as a citizen to put global citizenship into practice in my daily life and to set an example. So it's really interesting to see that there are similarities between pre-service teachers and teacher educators. Really, both studies show that teachers and teacher educators have similar perspectives, considering that this is an appropriate perspective to the current times and in line with their beliefs. Yet they feel that this is a vague and complex notion which requires them to have specific guidance. Therefore, from my point of view, it seems important to create spaces and times where teachers can really reconstruct knowledge and experiment with GCE in a more systematic and collaborative way. From my point of view, this can only occur if we strive for brave teacher education for global citizenship. And this is how I envision brave teacher education for global citizenship. From my point of view, this should be reflexive and inquisitive, stimulating teachers to ask questions, to seek answers, and to make connections, analyzing their own values and assumptions on GCE. It is research-based, so inviting teachers to conduct their own research individually and collectively in order to investigate the impact of particular GCE interventions, for instance. It is collaborative, so it should engage teachers as global citizens to work, learn, and grow together with peers, school staff, students, and members of the community. Brave teacher education should be dialogic, fostering open dialogue and discussion of sensitive issues. It should be transformative and emancipatory, aiming for individual and communitarian social change. It should be multidisciplinary, crossing discipline boundaries towards a whole school GCE approach. It is inclusive, aimed for all teachers in service, pre-service, teacher educators, and regardless of cultural background, religion, gender, or sexual orientation. And it is also systematic and should be systematic and ongoing and not restricted to teacher practicum or to a set of isolated training courses. But how can we put brave teacher education into practice? Well, I've been looking more closely at pre-service teachers, and I found that the life cycle of the butterfly is really a very useful metaphor. When pre-service teachers arrive at university, they often come with a set of beliefs and assumptions that they were formed during what I call the egg time, under the protective shell of the family, through contact with their peers and other teachers. And I feel that somewhere along the way, from when they start in their academic life, the decision to become a teacher really takes form, and the eggs, we can say that they hatch. So they arrive at the master stage as very hungry caterpillars that are eager to learn and to become the best possible teachers so that they can have a positive impact on their students. So our role as teacher educators is to turn these caterpillars into first chrysalids and then into wandering butterflies. And based on my experience and on my research results, I can see that at caterpillar stage, which I consider that occurs as before practicum, useful strategies for brave teacher education for global citizenship are reading and critically analyzing literature on GCE, assessing pre-service teachers' values and beliefs, because sometimes they say, well, I really respect others, but if you put them into some sort of a situation when they really have to put themselves into someone else's shoes, they can really assess their own values and beliefs and see, well, perhaps in this situation, perhaps I'm not that, and I'm using a lot of bias or stereotypes. So it's really interesting that they do this not only here, but also along their way. Another useful strategy is to investigate the world and the community for not only global issues, but more particular local issues, because most of the times pre-service teachers stand in the school and they're not aware of the community around them. So it's very important that they really investigate the world that is close to them. And also opportunities to discuss with their peers, with their students is useful when, for instance, in our master's courses, normally students work in pairs, and it's also very useful, and they have this critical friend that helps them and discusses with them, and they're also useful to share their own feelings. And at chrysalis stage, I feel that during practicum, it is essential that students experiment with new approaches and discover new strategies, that they collaborate with peers, with students and community members, and that reflect upon their own experiences. So it's very important that they do that, and as a reflection or writing learning diaries is also a very important strategy. Well, I feel that many of the students really remain in chrysalis stage for some time, even after practicum, until they feel strong enough to take off. And once this happens, and their wings, I think it happens with butterflies. Their wings are a little wet, and then when they are fully dry, they really can take to the air and search for flowers to feed. So I can see that at that stage, at butterfly stage, I can see that pre-service teachers and really teachers can really touch and inspire others, pupils and peers, and really have a positive impact in the community. So my hope is that you can all become butterflies and really help inspire hungry caterpillars in this beautiful journey towards global citizenship. Thank you so much. Muito obrigada. Merci. Grazie. Muchas gracias. Dankeschön. If you have any questions or would like to contact me on any project ideas, or if you have any comment you'd like to make in regards to this presentation, please feel free to send me an email to monicalarenko@ua.pt. Thank you so much.